The Himalayas, rooftop of the world. A mountain fortress protecting the remote land of Tibet. A nation closed to outsiders for centuries. But why? Could it be because this place, with its mystical traditions, guards an astonishing secret?
Welcome to Shangri-La.
In the 1930s, the book and movie Lost Horizon had an extraordinary impact on human imagination and brought a new word to the English language, a term for an earthly paradise, Shangri-La. For centuries, explorers from around the world have searched for a utopian community, hidden somewhere in Asia, isolated from the corruption of civilization. But does this paradise really exist? Only one man in the world may know the answer, the Dalai Lama. Ancient Mysteries travels to these mountains for an exclusive interview with Tibetan Buddhism's spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama. The search for Shangri-La will take us on a journey to find a perfect land, a land of immortality, a paradise here on Earth. In Tibet, one of the most beautiful and isolated regions of the world, a secret utopian community may be more than mere fantasy. In fact, Shangri-La may be based on a heritage of customs and traditions of a hidden paradise located here, in the most inaccessible and perhaps the most mysterious part of the world. The concept of such a paradise, or Shangri-La, is one of mankind's oldest dreams. But could paradise actually exist here on Earth?
The Tibetan name for Tibet is the land of eternal snow. The great mountains of Tibet are staggering when you see them. It is easy to imagine that they lead to a utopian paradise, that they connect heaven and earth.
To Tibetan Buddhists, there is perhaps one man who keeps the secret of the location of Shangri-La. The Tibetans call it Shambhala. He is the Dalai Lama, which translated means ocean of wisdom, the spiritual and political leader of 6 million Tibetans. In a ceremony so secret that parts of it are held behind a curtain, the Dalai Lama directs the creation of a sand mandala. It is a sacred circle made of intricate patterns of colored sand, symbolizing the kingdom of Shangri-La. For 10 days, the Dalai Lama will interpret this mystical design, telling scores of thousands of believers how to find Shambhala. Lured by the mandala's promise of a hidden paradise, Tibet has been the destination for a handful of intrepid explorers. Was the object of their obsession merely a romantic fantasy? Or was it a place lying just beyond the next mountain? The search would attract explorers and mystics, archaeologists and artists, all daring to infiltrate a nation that had closed its borders to the outside world. Could it be that here, in the Himalayas, there lived a race of spiritual supermen whose knowledge and powers exceeded those known to Western science? In the early 20th century, that belief was spread by an occult religious movement, the Theosophists. One of its followers became so enraptured with this concept that he mounted an expedition to search for Shangri-La.
This is the Roerich expedition, which set out from America to climb the King Alexander III mountains, which ring a territory whose customs and people had never been recorded pictorially.
He was Nicholas Roerich, a Russian-born artist, and his efforts to bring the wisdom of Shambhala to the West would eventually result in his nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize.
Nicholas Roerich believed that the physical realm of Shambhala was hidden deep in the Himalayas. And when he arrived in the Himalayas, it was all that he hoped it would be.
Into the forbidden city of Lhasa comes the expedition.
The colors, the light, the mountains themselves, they were both exquisitely beautiful to him and spiritually very meaningful.
Roerich was no dilettante. His quest was both scientific and spiritual. For 3 years, from 1925 to 1928, the Roerich expedition explored Tibet and the heart of Asia. They endured terrible hardships. In the harsh winters, 5 people died. The expedition covered more than 15,000 miles and crossed 35 of the highest mountain passes in the world. The expedition traveled under 2 flags, the Stars and Stripes, and the banner of the legendary Shambhala.
All through Roerich's trek, he raised over his tent the banner of Shambhala, which was a Tibetan tanka. A tanka is a Tibetan painting on silk, and he raised it over his tents because it was some kind of a spiritual protection, perhaps, or a hope.
Roerich painted what he saw, often visions of Shambhala inspired by his research and interviews.
There's one painting that Nicholas Roerich did called Burning of Darkness, and in it he depicts a group of men emerging from the mountains. The first is carrying a box from which emanates a blue flame, and this blue saturates the entire painting. It is believed that several of the men depicted in this painting were Mahatmas or masters or residents of Shambhala.
Did this mean that Nicholas Roerich had met the residents of Shambhala? He wrote about his experiences in a book called Shambhala, In Search of the New Era.
It remains a mystery whether Roerich actually found Shambhala, the physical Shambhala. However, there are certain indications that he believed he did. He apparently brought a letter written by the Mahatmas to the commissars of Soviet Russia when he visited Soviet Russia in 1926. How he received this letter, who wrote it, how it came into his hands, was it given to him directly by people he felt were genuine Mahatmas? We do not know.
He never announced that he had actually discovered Shambhala, except in a mystic, visionary sense. He read of the legends. He read the Tibetans books about their voyages, spiritual voyages to Shambhala, and inspired by those, he described Shambhala to a Western audience.
When Roerich returned to civilization, he did so with renewed calling. His was a cause that would gain influential followers and lead to a secret mission for the American government. He set out to create an international treaty by which the nations of the world would respect and preserve cultural treasures in times of war. They would be protected under the banner of peace, 3 red spheres surrounded by a red circle on a white field, a design Roerich had repeatedly seen in Tibet on rock paintings and banners. The so-called Roerich Pact gained the support of political leaders, including Henry Wallace, the Secretary of Agriculture in Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal administration. Wallace arranged for the treaty to be signed by 21 countries at the White House under FDR's watchful eye. He sent Roerich back to Central Asia in 1935, ostensibly looking for drought-resistant grasses. But we now know he also had a second clandestine assignment.
Of course, Roerich's mission was not only to find these grasses, but to search for Shambhala.
One footnote: when Wallace ran for president as an independent candidate in 1948, the release of his letters to Roerich beginning, "Dear Guru," destroyed his credibility with voters. Thus, Wallace's campaign was through. In 1935, at the time of Roerich's mission, the Great Depression gripped the country. People yearned for a utopian solution to the hard times. With war clouds on the horizon in Europe, the release of the movie Lost Horizon by director Frank Capra, based on the book by James Hilton, captured the hearts of a generation.
It comes as no surprise to me that James Hilton chose Tibet as the setting for Lost Horizons because of Tibet's mystery, its extraordinary beauty, its towering mountains, its desolate plateaus, its endless skies.
Lost Horizons describes a person who is lost in an airplane crash and finds a hidden valley filled with magical, wise persons who have the power of immortality and who have a sane and a peaceful and a spiritual society. And as long as you stay there, you do not age.
200 years ago. You're still alive, Father Barrow.
In the movie, Ronald Colman plays Conway, a sensitive British diplomat who is groomed to be the Dalai Lama's successor. But he is forced to leave to protect his brother, who has fallen in love with an exotic girl from Shangri-La.
It's all your fault. It was all arranged.
But the girl has lied about her
Why can't
age.
you leave us alone?
When they try to escape, in a horrifying sequence, the girl withers, growing old and dying before their eyes.
Look at her face!
Capra and his crew never went to Tibet. Lost Horizon was filmed in Los Angeles. The phenomenal impact inspired President Roosevelt to name the presidential retreat Shangri-La. Today, we know it as Camp David. While the benign message of Lost Horizon struck a chord in the West, other, more sinister forces were at work. On his expedition, Nicholas Roerich learned of a subterranean paradise called Agartha, with Shambhala as its capital. Agartha had tunnels penetrating hundreds of miles through the Earth's crust and was said to be inhabited by a race of supermen who possessed occult powers. But this was 1935. And none other than Adolf Hitler himself was intrigued by Agartha and its race of supermen.
Who knows why he was looking for Shangri-La, probably looking for it, hoping that he'd find these learned, advanced people and that they were all Aryan or something.
Hitler is said to have sent expeditions to search in European mines for the entrance to Agartha, and Nazi alpine specialists were reported on isolated peaks in Tibet. But Westerners could not bring back proof of Shangri-La. In a moment, Ancient Mysteries unravels a legend that may unlock the path to Shangri-La. Ancient Mysteries will return in a moment here on A&E. We now return to Ancient Mysteries. Here in Tibet, the legend of a hidden paradise dates back 800 years before the birth of Christ, when it was introduced by a prince from India, the Buddha. He called it Shambhala. A number of ancient Buddhist books allude to the location of Shambhala, describing it as a magical kingdom hidden among snow-capped mountains far to the north. Yet some of them point to the Tien Shan region, to the west of the Gobi Desert. The isolated Tien Shan region described in the guidebooks is not far from this place, Dunhuang, a Chinese site that is the center of a remarkable archaeological find. Hundreds of caves and grottos are carved into these sandstone cliffs. Called the Cave of 1,000 Buddhas, it is a sanctuary that is nearly 1,600 years old. The interiors of the caves are elaborately decorated with Buddhist paintings and statues that may be depictions of Shangri-La. In 1900, a Taoist monk exploring the caves unlocked a secret passage to a room full of Buddhist manuscripts, paintings, and books. Among them, one that is believed to be one of the oldest books in the world, dating to the year 868. Do these manuscripts hold the secret directions to Shangri-La? Could they be the source of the legend of Shambhala? Scholars have spent years attempting to decipher the texts, some of them in languages that are completely unknown. Some have suspected that the caves hide the entrances to tunnels leading to an underground Shangri-La called Agartha. Could the monks who lived here have used these caves as way stations on the journey to Shambhala?
Imagine yourself traversing this place. The wind's blowing. There's no greenery to be seen. There are jagged rocks. And then coming suddenly upon a place where there is greenery, where human beings relate to each other without fear. This would be Shambhala.
According to the sacred books, the kingdom's inhabitants live in peace, free of crime and hunger, in an earthly paradise of incomparable beauty. But why here, in this far-off, inhospitable part of the world? Perhaps one answer lies in the harsh landscape itself, where humans are humbled by the grandeur of the mountainous panorama.
An ordinary being perceives a place of suffering, dry, barren, rock. An enlightened being sees that place as it really is, the world doesn't change, only our perceptions of it change. Hence, some people see ordinary dry desert, other people see Shambhala.
And given that it is in the heart of Asia, it is not surprising that people would imagine that in that area would be paradises, special magic lands, that wizards and angels would hide secret refuges there for people fleeing the normal human problems.
A nomadic people, the Tibetans know the inner meaning of an impermanent existence. And at altitudes of 14,000 feet, every breath can be a moment of contemplation. When the Buddha's words of love and compassion first reached this place in the 7th century, the Tibetans were a fierce tribe. Over the next 1,000 years, they conquered their many enemies as the practice of Buddhism became deeply rooted. And then, the Tibetans did something unique in the history of human civilization. They exchanged weapons of destruction for monasteries of enlightenment. By the dawn of the 20th century, there were over 6,000 monasteries in Tibet, sheltering about a quarter of the population of the entire country, who devoted their lives to the search for inner peace.
In all of Europe, at the height of the Middle Ages, there were only 2,000 monasteries. So imagine a small country of 8 million people sustaining 6,000 monasteries, some of them with thousands of monks.
For centuries, behind the closed doors of Tibetan's ancient monasteries, the secret location of a hidden paradise may have been passed on from one generation of monks and lamas to the next. When asked, the monks always said Shangri-La was located to the north. But how could that be? To the north lay mountains never conquered, never crossed. If the passage to Shangri-La was so treacherous that it was physically inaccessible, how did the Tibetans get there?
The way they voyaged was through out-of-body journeying. The Tibetan science of mental control is so sophisticated that Tibetan adepts have learned to control their mind during dreams and to travel in what they call a dream body to other places, to speak with people, to interact with them, to be in those places, while their physical body remains at home in their bed. So through this mode of travel, the Tibetans went to Shambhala, reported on it, and wrote books about what it was like.
Whether or not Shambhala actually exists, or ever did exist, it has had a significant influence on the culture and history of Tibet. Today, confirmation of the faith of the Tibetan people can be found everywhere. Prayer flags fluttering in the wind are universal in Tibet. So long as they are moving, they are recording prayers for the benefit of those who put them up. The faithful walk, always turning a small hand prayer wheel filled with minute prayers printed on thin paper, or turning larger prayer wheels revolving with literally tons of paper prayers. Could the location of Shangri-La be determined through prayer and meditation? There may be clues here in one of the most sacred sites in Tibet, the Potala Palace, for centuries the monumental home to the god kings that Tibetans call the Dalai Lama. When we return, a rare glimpse at the inside of this remote palace and the room that guards the next clue in our search for Shangri-La. Ancient Mysteries will continue in a moment. We now return to Ancient Mysteries here on A&E. The holy city of Lhasa, at an altitude of 12,000 feet. It is called the place of the gods. The white walls and glimmering gold roofs of the Potala Palace appear to grow out of the cliffs. 1,000 windows shine like 1,000 eyes along the enormous perimeter of the Potala. What mysteries do they guard?
The Potala is filled with mysteries. From every era of Tibetan history and every region of Tibet and India and China and Mongolia, spiritual treasures, magical crystals, powerful objects have been collected there over the centuries. It is a gold mine of mysteries.
What wisdom was hidden within the sacred walls of the Potala? Does it contain evidence of the lost paradise of Shambhala?
So the Tibetans believe that at the heart of the Potala, there is a kind of spiritual, ritual, magical machinery of maintaining contact with the force of Shambhala, which is the force of the time machine Buddha. The monks of the Potala were specially trained in spiritual dances that were believed to bring the best out in the spirits of nature and the spirits of the heavens and the spirits of the humans. And every year they do the dances of Shambhala there on the Potala.
According to an ancient legend, the Potala, named after a holy mountain in India, rose magically in a single night. Its beauty surely the evidence of its divine creation. But history records that the Potala was begun in the 7th century, when a warrior king built a palace on this commanding site overlooking a settlement that goes back more than 1,300 years. Now the monks are gone. Today, the Potala is a poignant shell of its glorious past, merely a museum. It covers a staggering 130,000 square meters. A labyrinth containing the riches of the ages, rarely seen by outsiders.
Monks who lived in the Potala under the direction of the Dalai Lamas, they maintained the very elaborate, very sophisticated cult of the Wheel of Time Buddha, what I call the Time Machine Buddha, or Kalachakra Buddha, which is the Buddha that is especially associated with the myth of Shambhala. So the magical connection of the Tibetan civilization with Shambhala is through the rituals and the meditations and the artwork that is done in the Potala.
The Potala, as we know it, was planned by the 5th Dalai Lama. Construction began in 1663, but he didn't live to see the final results. The Potala was expanded by his successor and completed after 31 arduous years of labor. A sacred road encircles the buildings. Merely walking along it is said to absolve the mortal from all earthly sins. Pilgrims prostrate themselves for its entire length in order to secure everlasting happiness in their future life. Deep within the Potala Palace, there are intriguing clues to the search for Shangri-La. On the eastern extension of the third floor, in a room called the Kalachakra Chapel, there are statues of the 7 kings of Shambhala, and on the walls, murals showing the lineages of Shambhala. One large panel illustrates the final battle between the king of Shambhala and the forces of evil. What was the meaning of this terrifying scene? What was the significance of the 7 kings? They pray to one man who may know the secret location of Shangri-La. He is the Dalai Lama. When we return, the search for the reincarnation of this ancient deity, a man who still walks among us today. Ancient Mysteries will return in a moment, here on A&E. We now return to Ancient Mysteries. Surveying the icy panorama of Tibet, is it possible that Shambhala exists, yet we can't see it? Many Tibetans insist that Shambhala can be located, but only by those with finely tuned metaphysical powers. The enlightened. Tibetan Buddhists believe the Dalai Lama, who guards the secret location of Shambhala, will lead them to enlightenment. They believe this living deity passes the secret to a successor through reincarnation, a process that has continued for nearly 1,000 years. In 1933, the 13th Dalai Lama died. Might the secret of a Shangri-La die with him? Would a successor be found? Mysterious things began to happen. While his body lay in state in the Potala Palace, the Dalai Lama's head turned to the northeast. Soon, a strange star-shaped fungus appeared in the northeast corner of the shrine. Everywhere, people chanted and prayed that a new Dalai Lama would be found. But how? Tibetans believe in reincarnation, that the soul of every living being is reborn into another body, and that the actions of the soul in this life determine the body it will enter next. And so, Tibet had lost more than its ruler. The nation had lost its soul. Following the signs that pointed to the northeast, the search extended to the farthest, most forbidding corners of this closed nation. Parties of monks trekked across mountain passes at more than 19,000 feet, desperate to find the reborn soul of the Dalai Lama. Traveling to a sacred lake, the monks prayed and meditated, and a vision appeared in the water. They saw a monastery with roofs of jade green and gold, and a house with turquoise tiles. After 4 years of investigation, searchers in the northeast found the very house and monastery that matched the vision. A family with a small boy lived in the house.
The young boy walks over to the leader, reaches under his clothes, and grabs hold of his mala, which is a necklace that looks like this, and says, "That's mine." That mala had indeed belonged to the former Dalai Lama, the 13th Dalai Lama.
But how could they be sure that this boy was the Dalai Lama? They gave him a series of tests, asking the child to identify holy objects that had belonged to the dead spiritual leader. Incredibly, he was correct on every one. The search was finally over. In 1939, the child was taken to the capital city of Lhasa, escorted by a caravan of 50 people and 350 horses and mules. He would become the 14th Dalai Lama. In the year of the Iron Dragon, 1940, his coronation took place. It would be the last celebration for a way of life that would soon face possible obliteration. Alongside Tibet, a revolution had taken place. In 1949, Mao Zedong and the Communist Party declared the People's Republic of China. In 1951, the Chinese invaded Tibet. By 1959, even in his quarters in the Potala Palace, the Dalai Lama lived in peril.
Alerted to a Chinese plot to abduct him to Beiping, the spiritual leader of 3 million Tibetans crossed the high Himalayas to take asylum in India.
What's unique about this Dalai Lama is that it was prophesied in the 8th century that the 14th Dalai Lama would be the last to reign in Tibet. And we have this Dalai Lama being forced out in 1959 by the Chinese.
Under the Chinese, the monasteries were closed and destroyed. More than 1 million people in Tibet perished.
When the Chinese communists began their program of destruction in the 50s until the 70s, they destroyed over 6,000 major monasteries. Some of them had 15,000 monks in them.
Of over 6,000 monasteries in Tibet, by the early 1980s, only 13 were left. And many clues to the location of Shangri-La were lost. From his exile home in Dharamsala, India, the 14th Dalai Lama speaks to the conscience of the world. In 1989, his message of compassion was honored with the Nobel Peace Prize.
But this particular Dalai Lama has been the first Dalai Lama to come out and to reach out to the rest of the world.
In exile, the Dalai Lama has become a leader known for his compassion and wisdom.
He's a refugee, but as a result of his being a refugee, we have contact with him in the West, whereas for 2,000 years before, we didn't have this contact.
Today, like the holy masters before him, the Dalai Lama conducts a mysterious ceremony called the Kalachakra, a ceremony so secret, only the Dalai Lama himself and a select few know all of its ancient ritual.
In the past, even today, there are practitioners who gain some extraordinary experiences through meditation according to the Kalachakra Tantra.
For a period of 10 days, the Dalai Lama presides over the construction of the sacred mandala, a symbolic model of the palace of Shambhala. Could the mandala be a kind of map to our elusive destination? Or is it something else, something more profound?
Kalachakra means wheel of time. And chakra, just like in English we use wheel to mean a automobile, wheels, chakra also means in Sanskrit, it means machine. So Kalachakra means time machine. The Tibetans had a unique concept of a time machine, different from the Western concept. In the Buddhist concept, time itself is the machine. What is the machine producing? It is producing enlightened beings.
Through training, eventually, all the negative, emotions or negative forces eliminated. Finally, then you become enlightened one.
In the past, the ceremony was performed about once every 20 years. Now, the Dalai Lama performs it more frequently than any of his predecessors. Scores of thousands attend this, the most sacred of all Buddhist ceremonies. When we return, can this ceremony help to find the path to Shangri-La? Ancient Mysteries will return in a moment. We now return to Ancient Mysteries here on A&E. Is Shangri-La hidden in the vast expanse of Tibet? Certainly, the best confirmation of its existence would be to uncover indisputable archaeological evidence. What is it about these myths that continues to intrigue us?
Could there be such a thing as Shangri-La? A paradise hidden from the world where highly evolved individuals have brought out the goodness in themselves and have mastered reality in such a way that eventually they will bring it to all of us. Though all our materialist culture and science predisposes us to say no, how can we say so with conviction? Just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it does not exist.
That belief has brought these multitudes here for the conclusion of the Kalachakra ceremony.
A Tibetan will spend their entire life to be present at a single Kalachakra initiation ritual. This becomes for them their ticket to Shambhala. In the next life or the life after that, however long it might take, they don't worry about it. They know they'll get there.
At the end, witnesses to the ceremony leave, prepared for the journey to Shambhala. The grains of the mandala are swept into eternity to symbolize the spiritual nature of the journey that lies ahead and honor the impermanence of all things.
To me, Shambhala is really mysterious land. If we accept part of this world, then we have to find through map. You can't find. So it is quite clear that Shambhala not exist on this planet. So then, the conclusion in somewhere in the space, that also I think possible. But I have not much interest in all these things. My main concern or interest is our own beautiful planet, but full of trouble.
We may be drawn to the legend of Shangri-La because it touches upon our deepest desires. To find just one spot on earth where the most human side of existence, pain, sadness, and suffering, cease to exist.
Here's my hope that we all find our Shangri-La.